Who's there?
Amish.
Amish who?
You don't look like a shoe.
Amish who? You look like a sheep? Okay.
Hey, Caroline, can I read those for what I'm going to Thank you. I think it's funny. Well.
I do, yeah. That's good, thank you. Did I try one on you?
Absolutely.
Okay, you started.
Not a problem.
Who's there?
Oh, shit.
That's the whole point.
You what? What? Vermont? Oh, what? Wow. It's almost to Josh, and he's like, don't do that.
Good morning, everyone. It's time to start, apparently. So, you know just as well as I do exactly where we are in this class. We are on the eve of a test. Today is Wednesday. We will be reviewing for the test with his next class on Friday. You have a test review sheet. I gave that out last class, and I did mention that it's kind of lengthy. I don't expect you to complete it all, but if you want to work on every single problem between now and the test on Friday, you are certainly welcome to. There's plenty to do there, plenty to practice. You did all of it? All right, terrific. I don't know how long that took you, but I hope it didn't take you like 4 hours.
Maybe like an hour or
Okay, that's not too bad. I'm going to start today by returning some quizzes from last class first, and then we'll get into the review and finish as much as we can of that today. So. All right, so like we have, at least right now, we have 2 people missing. Although I see a book bag here, so I'm not sure what
Libby's here, I just don't know what she's doing right now. She's here, though.
okay.
No.
All right, so okay, so as I said, let's get into the test review. I have on Canvas, I don't know if you know this here. I don't know if you know, but I do have a copy of the test review on Canvas, and I also have a copy of the test review answer key, I believe, on Canvas. So that way, if we do not finish or get through everything, or all your questions maybe are not answered during the time we have today, that you can at least refer to the test review answer key. And sometimes just by looking at the answer helps you understand, well, how was this problem done? Or what am I supposed to do for a problem like this? You see the answer and like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember we talked about that, or we did something like that before. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is bring that up right now. Can you see? Oh, good. Excellent. You should be able to see that. This individual. Yeah, this should be available as a PDF on Canvas. If you want to check that out or get into it between now and Friday. Okay, so the first thing we have here is we have intervals. Man, it seems like a long time since we've studied intervals, but That's when this, that's what we've started with since the last test, so that's what this test coming up we'll go back to. Notate the specified intervals above the given note. You can check your answers with mine. I believe spelling intervals above the given note is generally the easier of the two tasks when you're asked to spell intervals above or below a given note. I find it easier to spell above, but you may feel differently. So, I mean, it's hard to really go back to that far, but you remember, we talked about how intervals, the size of the interval, you can count staff increments like staff lines and spaces. You can count pitch letter names to get the interval size, just the quantity, I should say, correct. And then you need to know a little bit about the qualities. We talked about how unisons and fourths and fifths and octaves are called perfect. And perfect intervals, if they're made a half step larger, automatically become augmented. And if perfect intervals are made a half step smaller, they automatically become diminished. And then over on the other side of the interval spectrum, or chart, however you want to think of it, we have seconds and thirds and sixths and sevenths. And those have four possible qualities or states or modifiers. Major, minor, augmented, and diminished. We know that major intervals become augmented if they're made a half step higher or larger, and minor intervals become diminished if they're made a half step smaller. And you go between the four floors of those four qualities or modifiers of seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. So I'm trusting that you can see that. I did all those things. I had to think through all those things to get these correct. Does anyone have any questions about a particular one of these six here? All right. Then let's go. Let's take a look at the next set. Specified interval below the given note. So here, you obviously want to write your note below the one given. And you can check your answers with mine. And again, they have to be pretty much exactly like mine, spelled in the exact same octave register with the exact same accidental. Otherwise, it would be incorrect. Let's see if I can increase the size of this thing more. Is coming to this class kind of like going to the eye doctor for an appointment?
Sometimes.
Sometimes? I had a friend in college that he'd go to the eye doctor for an appointment, and the doctor would say, cover your one eye, so he'd do this. And then the doctor would say, well, cover your other eye, so he'd do this. He'd say, I can't see anything. Which is really silly. All right, questions about these. You remember how when we were spelling intervals below a given note, we often said that you could find the inversion of that note, spell it above, and then drop that note in octave, if it helps you to think of it that way. So for instance, like the first one, a major sixth below an A, if you ask yourself what is a minor third above an A, you'll get a C, and then you just drop that note one octave, and then that'll be the exact answer that you're looking for. So we had talked about the aid sometimes of interval inversion to help you get the interval spelled below a given note. And you all remember, hopefully, your inversions, right? Major intervals become minor, augmented become diminished, perfect intervals remain perfect when inverted, that kind of thing. Sixths become thirds. I don't feel we need to go through all that, otherwise we might be here all day. Hey, speaking of inversions, identify the interval shown first and then write and label its inversion. So the first one is an augmented fourth, B flat up to E natural. How do you write an inversion? Well, you just switch the position of the two notes. In the first case, the B flat is below the E, so you can either move the B flat up an octave like I did to make it above the E, Or if you wanted to take this E and you wanted to lower it an octave, you could have done that and that would be the exact same thing. So if you have a really low E, like one ledger line below the staff and then the B flat, that would work as well. Either way, when you invert an augmented fourth, you should get a diminished fifth. You will get a diminished fifth. The other interval in that funky C clef or alto clef is a minor second. It looks like it's between the notes G and A flat. So you can invert the interval the way I did. The way I did it eliminates the need for any ledger lines. Although if you want to write to A flat, move that down an octave, you could do that. Either way, a minor second will always invert to a major seventh. Major seventh. So sevenths invert to seconds and vice versa, sixths to thirds and vice versa, fifths to fourths and vice versa. Questions about that? Hopefully you remember a little bit about compound intervals. Compound intervals are just simple intervals with an extra octave of space added in. So the first interval, if you have to label that, that is a minor tenth. Remember, tenths are just like thirds, because when we add an octave to a simple interval, we actually get a number or an interval one less than what you'd expect. So an octave plus a third is actually a tenth. An octave plus a second is a ninth. A fourth plus an octave is an 11th. A fifth plus an octave is a 12th, etc., etc. Anyway, so if I were to take that low F and I were to raise it an octave and put it really near that A flat, that would be a minor third. And because the third is minor, well then the tenth is going to be the exact same quality. A compound interval's quality is the exact same as its simple interval counterpart. The given interval over here happens to be a diminished 11th, C up to F flat, C up to F flat. If I raise the C an octave, or if I lowered the F flat an octave, that would be a diminished fourth. Adding an extra octave of space still keeps it diminished, doesn't change the quality, but it would make the size an 11th rather than a fourth. So do you know, I hope that you guys are comfortable at least identifying one or two compound intervals, inverting like we did in the section above, one or two intervals. Okay, respell the given intervals to represent their enharmonic equivalents. Who remembers how to enharmonically respell an interval?
So you keep the way I did it, you can keep the bottom note the same, and then the top note is like so like, okay, so say the first one, you have F sharp, well then you just go up a minor second, basically, so G flat.
Okay. Yeah, so basically, I think what she's trying to say is to respell an interval enharmonically, just choose one of the two pitches and respell that one enharmonically, and you'll get it. Yeah. So in the first case, I chose the top pitch, F sharp. If I respell only that pitch enharmonically, I get G flat. Leave the other note of the interval the same, and B flat to G flat with this in minor sixth. Otherwise, you can choose the bottom note, respell the B flat enharmonically, and leave the F sharp alone. Either way, A sharp to F sharp, you still get a minor sixth. Either answer would be correct. And then over here, either answer would be fine. Either G up to F flat or F double sharp up to E is a diminished seventh. However you'd like to do it. So just pick one of the notes of the interval and respell it enharmonically. And then the entire interval should be respelled enharmonically to what it should be, to the size it should be. Are we finally done with intervals? Did we finish the first two?
Yes.
Wow. Look at that. We just covered all of intervals in 15 minutes. And it took us 4 days class periods. That's a lot of information. Okay, this is going to be a little too large. I better go back down. Whoa, not that small. There we go. All right, let's take a look at this. Identifying triads and seventh chords according to their type. You can check your answers. We have done this fairly recently, so I hope this is a little fresher in your mind than intervals. You've got diminished seventh, then a major triad, major seventh, a minor triad, a half diminished seventh, a diminished triad, major minor seventh, and then minor seventh. And again, you can copy down those answers now if you don't have it all finished. And if you can't get to all of it, again, this answer key is posted on Canvas for you. Let me know though, now's the good time to ask questions if you're still confused about how to do something, or if you don't understand how I got a particular answer, now's the best time to do that, because outside of class you can't really ask me. I wish I could post myself on Canvas sometimes, but I can't do that. So. Moving right along then. Oops. Hang on a second. This thinks I want to select it, but I don't. Analyze the following example using Roman numerals and inversions. In my experience over the years, some students will get the second chord wrong. And if they get it wrong, it's because they neglected to note or see that the tenor, the F, the dotted half note in the tenor, upstem in the bass clef, that actually sounds all the way through the measure. And that's why I have an arrow there. So that means there is an F as part of that chord at the end of measure 1. It's not just A, C, E flat, but it's really F, A, C, E flat. And that changes your analysis of that chord considerably. Normally, if you think it's A, C, E flat, you'll call it 7 diminished 6. But with the F, which should be in there, the root is F, which is scale degree 5 in B flat major. It's a 7th chord in second inversion, and really it should be 5, 4, 3. 5, 4, 3. Remember, Roman numerals tell us the scale degree that serves as the root of the chord in the key we're working in. The case of the Roman numeral tells us whether it's major, minor, augmented, or diminished. And then the bass position symbols or inversion numbers tell us what the bass position of the chord happens to be in. That is, what tone of the chord is the lowest sounding pitch in that chord. Another chord that students sometimes fail to get is, I forget, it's one of these ones in the second to last measure. Do you see how the C dotted half note in the alto voice sounds through the entire bar? So the first chord is FAC in that measure. The next chord is still FAC. And the last chord in the penultimate measure looks like it's FAC E flat. FAC E flat. Okay. Questions about that?
Can you explain the third one?
The 1-6?
Yeah.
Yes. I should be able to. I wish I could point. I don't know, can I? Well, I'll just point from here. The first chord in measure 2. I know one of the notes is doubled or duplicated, but that doesn't really matter for the purposes of analysis. So really, we only have 3 different pitches on B1 in that measure. We have a B flat, a D, and an F. Now, of those 3 pitches, when you arrange them in stacked thirds, the lowest one's going to be B flat, which makes B flat the root of those 3 notes. So I'm using a Roman numeral 1 because B flat is scale degree 1 in B flat major. And Roman numeral 1s in major keys are always capital or uppercase.
So the Roman numeral isn't determined by what's on the bottom, but determined by like the chord itself?
Yeah, the Roman numeral, okay, thank you. The Roman numeral itself is not determined necessarily by what's on the bottom. That's only true when the chord is in root position. The Roman number itself is determined solely by what note is the root of those chords. And the root may be in any of the upper voices, right? So, I'm not going to call this a 3 chord. And in prior years, I get a lot of students that will say, well, the third chord should be some kind of 3 because D's on the bottom. But D is not the root, right? The root doesn't have to be always on the bottom. Sometimes the root is up in the stratosphere somewhere. It's rearranged. But if you take a stock of the 3 pitches, D, F, and B flat, and then you rearrange them in your mind in stacked thirds, then B flat would have to be on the bottom. And the stacked third arrangement is always the root position arrangement. It's always guaranteed to tell you that the bottom note is the root. And that's the note that determines what scale degree in the key gives you your Roman numeral, your Roman number. Now, I can also see that since the notes B flat, D, and F, those are in root position, I can also see then that D is the third of the chord, F is the fifth of the chord. Which of those members, the root, the third, or the fifth, is now the lowest one? Which is the one in the bass? The third of the chord. And when the third of the chord is on the bottom, we say a triads in first inversion. Right? That's what its definition is. And what's the number we use to show first inversion? Just the 6. So that's why I got capital 1, 6 on them. There's a lot of information packed into that one analysis symbol. It really is. But I think if you understand it, you'll get the hang of it, and it'll make your, when you go through and you perform music and you look at music, it'll make it that much more understandable and meaningful for you. Good. Are there other questions about any chords in this exam? All right. Put it right there. Let's go on then. Figure bass and pop chord symbols. Your chords should look pretty much like mine. They can be notated in any octave, but they have to have the same pitch in the bass as mine, and they have to have the same accidentals as mine. Notice that in this section here, there was a key signature of 2 flats. And I said in the instructions, the key signature at the beginning of the staff applies to all of the measures. So that means in the first chord, the E flat 7, the bottom note is actually E flat because it's in the key signature. Then I have a G. Then the third note, or the fifth of the chord, I should say, that B is actually B flat because it's in the key signature. But I needed a D flat to make it an E flat dominant or major minor 7th chord. And D flat was not in the key signature, so I had to stick that one on there. Physically, I had to write that in. Now, would I mark it wrong if you wrote a flat on the root E and a flat on the 5th of the chord B in addition? No, I wouldn't mark it wrong. It's just, you're just, I guess, overstating what's in the key signature, but it's still the right notes. Do you know what the symbols mean? What type of chord they're calling for? The second one, G minor 7th, that's calling for a minor minor 7th chord whose root is G. But just with the D of that chord in the bottom. C minor 7 flat 5 is the same as C half diminished 7. So a half diminished 7 on C. G capital M7 is G major major 7. So it's a major major 7th chord on G with B as the lowest note. Notice I had to put a natural on my B because otherwise it's B flat and I don't want that note in that chord. So B flat has no reason to be in a G major major 7th chord. And then finally the last one, just a capital letter by itself refers to a major triad.
I wrote this one kind of weird, but it's still right?
So you got D, F, G, and B flat.
Yeah, I accidentally just put I made it look weird. You see what I'm saying? Like I made it look.
I think I can follow that. You're good.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yep, as long as you got the right notes. So, questions about any of this?
Just for reference, can you go over the G major 7 / B?
Let me put some, let's see, treble clef and the 2 flats in the key signature, so I'm working with the same kind of material here. Okay, G major 7th / B. I'm gonna write this in root position first. A major seventh chord on G, that's what this is calling for, is a major triad on G, GBD, and then a major seventh, G up to F sharp, is exactly a major seventh interval. The slash B, the note after the slash, this means that that is the note of the chord that should be the lowest sounding one, the one on the bottom. So it wants the B on the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. Huh, look at that. My key signature is so far away, it's out of my peripheral vision. I have to put a natural on here, otherwise it's B flat.
Okay, yeah, that's, I did that wrong. I
Yeah.
guess I didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, to make this a major triad, it's G, B natural D. I couldn't see this out of the back of my head. But yeah, this is calling for B flat, so I do need a natural to make a G, B natural D. That's a major seventh. And now the B natural, which is what this is calling for, if you put that on the bottom, don't forget the accidental, and then you'll have D, and then I guess F sharp comes next, and then G. Is that how I have? Yeah, I just wrote it off with lower or higher over this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the only reason I got it wrong is I did not put it natural blended.
Yeah. Okay. And that's the case. What you have to do that, especially when you have a key signature out front. These are just a few chords to fill in using figured bass. Remember with figured bass, all the notes you write go above the bass note. No notes below the bass note. In figured bass. I do want to make a point to mention this last figure here, 7 sharp. I can't remember if I mentioned it last class or not. Many students are tempted to say, well, if this is a 7, that means this accidental applies to the 5th, and then the 3rd. But that's not correct. That is not correct. An accidental by itself, not next to or associated with any number, always refers to the 3rd above the bass. And so, since this is true, by default, the 5th of the chord would have to be thought of and inferred in between. Okay? So that's how I got the last chord. So the sharp goes actually on the D, so it's B, D sharp, F sharp from the key signature, and A. And again, I'm not too worried about rhythm or stems, when you fill in the notes above the bass for figures. Because I know you're focusing on puncturing and other things. Questions about that? You know, oh, I had this in my notes. I have this in my notes. Okay. If you see just this, what does that mean? You need a full
That's just the 3rd is natural.
Uh-huh. And then what other number is inferred?
5.
5.
5, that's right. Okay. I saw some of this on the quiz. When you see a 6, does that mean 6-5? Does it mean 6-4? No. It means, yeah, you gotta know it means 6-3, otherwise you'll get the wrong chord here. And on the quiz I just returned, I saw this, and then sometimes people are tempted to do this. Ooh. Close, I can see where you're coming from, but not quite. 6-4 is the complete symbol for, and it's just for a triad. Just for a triad. Then we have our 7th chord symbols. There's root position, which does imply 7-5-3. That one implies 6-5-3. What if you had a symbol that looked like that? What does the flat refer to again?
It refers to the 3rd,
Okay,
and it's 6.
and then that's not a full symbol yet, so what's the full?
6, 4, 3.
Yeah, 6-4-3 is the full symbol. Okay. And then finally, let's see, I have something like this. What's the full symbol?
6, 4, 2. And the 4th is going to be raised a half step.
That's right. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be sharp. It may be sharp. It's just raised a half step higher than what the key signature would call that note. And by the way, the plus means the same thing as the slash through a number. But when you see an accidental like this, or like this, that means you put that exact accidental on the note that far above the base. You apply that actual, the flat to the actual, or sharp, whatever it is. Okay. Well, we're making progress here. Next page. Oh, this is probably the most difficult part of the review right here. Because it asks you all to use almost everything we've learned. And again, don't worry about the stems as you realize the notes of the figured bass. Don't worry about the rhythm. If you just have circles for note heads above the notes, that's fine. But what you need to do in a case like this is you need to fill in the notes above the bass according to the figures first. Just plain plugging in intervals at those distances above the bass. Then after you've got them in, then take a step back, look at the chord with fresh 21st century modern eyes, think about chord roots and inversions and all that stuff in the context of C sharp minor, and you should be able to get those correct Roman numerals. But I think this is one of the trickier ones on the entire review, this section. Because it asks you to do a lot. It asks you to think about quite a bit. Questions about that? If there's no number underneath a bass note, do you skip it? No, unfortunately, if you did that, you'd probably lose a point or two. Did we talk, maybe I mentioned this already in this class. Did any of you ever work in a grocery store? Did we talk about this? Well, when I was, before, in between high school and college, I worked at a grocery store one summer and I was one of the checkers. I did talk about this with one class. Anyways, you swipe something across the scanner, right, and it doesn't scan. What does the customer always say? If it doesn't scan, it should be what?
Free.
Free, that's right. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like this. If there's no number underneath the bass note, I can just skip it, right? No. Did any one of you ever work in be a checker? Yeah? Yeah, you know. You hear that 100 times probably.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's not scanning. I guess it must be free. Okay, I'll just move on then. Now, a couple words of explanation about this section. Let me shrink it down in size just a smidge. How do I know, for instance, in the second problem of this section, how do I know that the key is G major? Did I just like pull it out of thin air, kind of guess, and wow, I was lucky, I got it right?
It's because in major, the Roman numeral 2 is lowercase, and minor, it's a lowercase with a
That's
finish.
right. So we're coming up with the key based on the type or the quality of the Roman numeral. So in the second measure, because the 2 chord is just lowercase, it's minor, I know I must be in a major key because 2 chords in major keys are always minor. Remember I asked you to memorize this? And that's on the table on the last page of the review, which we'll hopefully get to. And how do I know it's G? Well, because there's 1 sharp in the key signature. If I know it's major and I know there's 1 sharp in the key signature, it must be G. It can't be E minor. Same thing for the third problem. A minor 4 only occurs in minor keys. Which minor key has 2 flats in its key signature? G minor. And finally, the minor 3 chord in this problem here, minor 3 chords only occur normally in major keys. Which major key has 6 sharps in its key signature? F sharp major. Now, let's go back to the first one. Why did I have to put the word minor in parentheses there?
Because the 5 is always capitalized in either major or minor.
That's right, because the 5 is capital or major in both major and minor keys. So that's ambiguous. I have to tell you, well, specifically minor, and then you look at the key signature and say, then you must be talking about F minor. Yes, I am. The same is true for the 7 diminished triads. They're diminished in both major and minor keys on scale degree 7. So I have to tell you one or the other mode, major versus minor. All right, the only other thing which we'll come across to maybe in another section is why, let me see, why in the first one there, the 5, 4, 3, why do I have to put a natural on that E? Does anyone know? We must have talked about this.
We did it, but I don't remember.
Okay. Well, you see, if I didn't have a natural on the E, the chord would be C, E flat, G, B flat. And that would be a minor, minor 7th chord. And that's not what the Roman numeral is asking for. The Roman numeral is asking for a major, minor 7th chord. So to make the triad portion major, I need C, E natural, G, B flat. It comes down to this. I must have meant, I can't even remember, it's been, I just do this every year, but whenever you spell a 5 chord or a 7 chord in a minor key, that chord will contain scale degree 7 somewhere in it. It'll contain the leading tone of that key. Leading tones in minor keys always need to be raised a half step with an accidental. I think I put it in my notes a better way to explain it. Remember that a key signature for a minor key only applies exactly to the natural form of the minor scale. Do you remember that from last unit? But where do most of our chords in minor, where do they, the diatonic ones, where do they come from? They come from the harmonic minor scale. And in the harmonic minor scale, do you remember scale degree 7, you always had to raise a half step? Well, because the key signature conforms or works only with the natural minor scale, and the 5 and the 7 chords use a scale degree from the harmonic minor scale, that's why we always have to raise the leading tone or scale degree 7 whenever it appears in a chord, when you're in a minor key. You don't have to do this in major keys. You never have to do it in major keys, but in minor keys you do. And the only 2 chords where you have to add an accidental are capital 5 chords and diminished 7 chords. Because those are the only 2 chords in a minor key that will use the leading tone, what I call T. I don't know, does that make sense? It's like, let me just show you a quick couple scales on the natural and the harmonic. So this is C natural minor, and if I use the key signature works for the natural minor exactly. But if I wanted to turn natural minor into harmonic minor, can anyone remember how I do that? Don't I have to raise scale degree 7 a half step? Well, so because to write a harmonic minor scale, because I need an accidental, that anytime this pitch occurs in any chord, then I always have to raise that pitch with an accidental as well. And that's why the 5 chord and the 7 chord. You see how when I build a chord on scale degree 5, you see how it's got that pitch in it? And you see how when I build a chord on scale degree 7, obviously it has that pitch in it, right, because it's the root. I'm trying to make this as clear and vivid as possible, even though it may not, make 100% sense, but the rule of thumb is whenever you have a 5 chord or a 7 chord in minor keys, you have to apply an accidental to one of those. Get it to be spelled right. We have more triads and 7th chords to spell. It looks like I've got a few measures in treble clef, a few in alto clef, and several measures in the bass clef. But yeah, that's another thing, on the test, just keep an eye out for clef changes if there are. That would be very helpful to you, to your advantage. Let me pause here for a moment. Questions or concerns or comments about this section, or really any section we've gone over so far? This is the other section where the accidentals for 5 chords and 7 chords in minor keys comes into play. Notice, well, the first measure has a 5 chord, but it's in a major key, so I don't need any accidentals. But notice the third problem is a 5 chord in a minor key. You see how that minor key is A minor? What is scale degree 7, or the leading tone in A minor? What pitch? Which one? Oh, you're going the other way. That's scale degree 2. Go right below the A key. It's G, right? That's scale degree 7. So do you see that's why I can't leave it as G natural? I had to put an accidental on the G to make it G sharp. Because you just got to raise it a half step. There's one other chord in this. Oh yeah, it's the one in C minor. It's asking you to spell a chord on, a chord on scale degree 7. Well, we use, which scale degree 7 do we use for the root of our chord? We use T from harmonic minor. So what is scale degrees, what is the raised scale degree 7 from harmonic minor in C minor? Well, I got that actually on the board. Is it not B natural? None of the other chords in this section, though, require an accidental. You know, even though in the third problem, the chord requires a G sharp in A minor, and even though the chord in the fifth measure requires a natural, a B natural in C minor, those are still called diatonic chords. They still belong and fit into the key, because we're just using one of the particular tones, one of the particular scale degrees, the raised 7th scale degree, from the scale to get those chords. I'm almost at the end. Look at this, I'm almost at the end. I didn't know I was going to get through everything today. Questions? All right, now this table, I'm going to shrink it just a smidge here so you can see the whole thing. This table you should have memorized by Friday's test. You remember the official scale degree meanings. Supertonic, subdominant, dominant, submedian, and leading tone. And then the qualities or the types of Roman numerals we get in major keys and then also in minor keys on each scale degree. I had asked you weeks ago, I said you'll need to have this memorized for the test. So in major keys we get capital or major 1 chords, minor or lowercase chords on scale degrees 2 and 3. Major chords on scale degrees 4 and 5, a minor chord on scale degree 6, and a diminished chord on scale degree 7. In minor keys, the far right column, we get a minor chord on scale degree 1, so that's that should be a lowercase 1, or a lowercase, Roman numeral 1. Diminished triad on scale degree 2, a major triad on scale degree 3, minor on 4, major on 5 and 6, and then diminished on scale degree 7. Notice the 2 chords that are identical in both major and minor keys are the 5 and the 7. Those are the only two ones that are identical are the same. I was told, at least we caught each other in the hallway. I was told by Micah yesterday, he is planning to have a test review tomorrow. I just don't know what time.
I think he said 7, but I'm not for sure.
Okay,
I
I
think
don't
that's
know.
what he was thinking.
I don't know if he had decided upon a final time at that point when I saw him, but, yeah, just keep an eye on, he may, does he text you or message you or remind you or whatever the term is, hashtag you, I don't know. I don't know what the term is. Not quite, that's not the right term in that verb. But he is planning to have it tomorrow, so whatever time it is, if you need to go, I hope you can go, I hope your schedule allows. You might not even feel have to stay for the whole review, but if you want to go for just, 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatnot. Seriously though, I would spend at least an hour studying for this test. I mean, don't just say, yeah, I feel like I know this, I'm gonna wing it. You've got to devote a little time to this, at least an hour, if you want to do well, and it'll show in your grade, your test grade. Yeah, and so that's all we'll be doing in class on Friday. We'll take however long it takes the test. Any last questions about anything before we go? Yes?
Sorry, the test is in class this time? Okay.
It is, yeah. It's always in class. If for some reason that somebody can't be here for the test, I am going to post it on Canvas, but you still need to take the test and turn it in by the end of the day Friday. I have on Canvas, I think I have it's going to disappear from Canvas or close by the end of the day on Friday, so you've got to take it. And by the way, if you take it online, you have to print it out and fill it out. Okay? So I've got students that tell me they don't have a printer. Well, that's your problem. You got to find a printer and print it out and fill it out. Okay? And then you can send it to me on Canvas too. But the best way to do it is just take it right in here because I'll be here. Okay? All right, so let's stop. We're a few minutes early. That's fine with me. Let's stop for the day. And I'll see some of you tomorrow for oral skills, but if not, I'll see you on Friday for the test. Yes. Yeah, it's actually a board. I remember board never being defined. So yeah, like for instance, you think of remove the C up and off the look here. C to F flat is a diminished. And remember when we had an office plus a 4, we did one less than, so we're getting 11. So 11s can only be perfect on one subordinate. They cannot be Yep. Wow, yeah, you did a lot. That's excellent preparation. So just look it over before.
Question,
Yes.
are we designated just the 50 minutes or can we go longer?
No, it'll be, let's see, well, I could probably give you up to 55 minutes, well, because I don't think there's a class like immediately after this. Like right now at noon, I don't think there's anything, so I mean, you can have probably a little longer than 50 minutes if you need it.
Okay.
Yep.
And how much of the review is, how many problems of each kind of thing are going to be on the test? Or
That I don't know, but I mean, I've got to keep it short enough and curtailed enough so that someone can finish it reasonably within, 45, 50 minutes.
Okay. So page, 2 pages maybe?
Well, it might be like one page front and back and then one more page,
Okay.
just front,
Okay.
something like that. I think that's typically what they are.
And then is that chart going to be on the back we have to fill out, or is it just?
It'll be on the test somewhere. I don't know if it's on the back, but it'll be there somewhere. Yeah.
Okay.